Welcome to My Business Matters, the Michigan Chamber podcast.
Hi there. I'm Wendy Block, Senior Vice President of Business Advocacy and Member Engagement for the Michigan Chamber of Commerce and host of today's My Business Matters podcast. On today's episode, which is really a part two of a conversation that we began in our previous episode, I am joined by three very esteemed guests. The Senate's new Appropriations Chair, Sarah Anthony, the Michigan House's new Appropriations Chair, Angela Whitwer, and the Governor's State Budget Director and her budget lead, Chris Harkins. So we've got the introductions behind us, and we are going to get right going. So in our last episode, we talked a little bit about just kind of how we have this new trifecta of control in Michigan, with Democrats controlling the Michigan House, the Michigan Senate, the governor's office. And we talked about just how Michigan has kind of a unique opportunity with its balance sheet to be kind of moving forward with some new priorities and some things that we haven't previously had the resources to be able to fund. So I would like to kind of elaborate on that and talk to our two lawmakers about priorities. So the first week of session, we saw that Speaker Tate and Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks were able to come together with a list of 6 key priorities for the caucuses for 2023. And several of them do have a budgetary impact. Things like the pension tax repeal, things like the expansion of the earned income tax. And so I want to know kind of how you are feeling about those issues, which I assume you're in support of, and also kind of when it comes to your individual priorities and those things that you really feel passionate about, what are some of those things that you're eyeing? So maybe Representative Whitwer, we'll start with you and then move to Senator Anthony. Sorry.
Thanks, Wendy. I put in the first bill for the State House, and that bill was the pension tax repeal, and it is one of my biggest priorities and has been since Senator Anthony and I started. We share a district, and Senator Anthony is my senator, and it happens to be one of the top 3 issues that I actually hear at the door. So we always talk about roads and schools. Well, in my district, pension tax is one of the top 3. And it hits a lot of people. So it's an extremely important priority for me to make sure that we do some form of lowering the taxes on our seniors. So we need to be able to help them with that. And then along with that, I've always been a person that wants to look out for people that may need a little lift up. And EITC is a way that we can do that and refill that and bring people out of poverty. And so the Senate and the House are right now talking about where we go with that. And Senator Anthony and I are on the same page with all of this, I believe.
Senator, you want to jump in?
Ditto. Take something like EITC, which was not an accident that was one of the first 6. There's these large coalitions and partners who have come together from the business community, from social justice organizations, nonprofits, faith leaders who have said the indicator, the one thing that we can be doing to lift folks up, as Rep. Whitwer said, was to raise the earned income tax to 30% and to make it meaningful in the lives of people in this state. My perspective is pretty clear that I am trying to look at long-term investments, things that have been neglected for decade after decade, probably before I was born, to say, how can we close some of these gaps? When I've been having conversations with stakeholders and interest groups, the number one question I've been asking everyone that walks into my door is, how does this help people? How are we lifting folks up? And that could be a small business owner, that could be a teacher, someone who honestly just needs a helping hand. How is whatever we're going to be funding in the state budget going to impact the lives of people? And even when we talk about investing and attracting businesses, I have been in so many conversations in which we're talking about attracting corporations to Michigan, but we don't make those decisions in isolation. If a company decides to relocate here or just locate here, they're not just looking at the tax incentives. They also want to know how our schools are, how are our roads, is the water clean? Are folks going to have placemaking things that attract people to these communities? So I think in order for us to really reinvest in our state, we have to be looking at it from a holistic perspective.
Yeah, I think that's all a really good point. And just, for the record, the Chamber is very supportive of the EITC proposal as well. And so, some common ground there.
Awesome.
Director Harkins, let me talk about you. The governor's been, very outspoken about the roads and the need to fix the damn roads. I imagine that is something that will be part of the governor's budget priorities and probably shared by all. But what are other things that you're expecting to kind of come out of the gate with? Maybe you can't tell us this quite at this point, but with recommendations on and beyond kind of some of these things that we've talked about in terms of specific proposals.
Sure. And you're right, Wendy, I can't tell you too much
I'm not
because
asking.
then no one will tune into the budget presentation in a few weeks. But I think what you'll see from the governor are a lot of the things that she's been very clear about all along. We've seen a commitment from the governor on the EITC front to bring that percentage up. And again, we appreciate the partnership with the Chamber and chambers around the state to support that initiative. Similarly, as Representative Whitwer pointed out, the governor's been very clear about an intent to change the pension tax. But similarly, the governor's made improvements in education, improvements in higher education, working on the roads, infrastructure, and then creating a better business climate that I think Senator Anthony just referenced. A lot of these issues are intertwined. And so the governor's looking at a lot of these pieces as pieces in a puzzle you can put together that create a really robust budget picture. And I think what you'll see when we do release the budget in a few weeks is a lot of that same thought that's been successful the last few years. We've been very successful with our legislative partners, even in a divided government previously. We've been able to reach across the aisle, find common values there, and work with our friends, both Democrats and Republicans. And I think you're going to see that same sort of intent as we go forward. Well, we've got a Democratic-controlled legislature, and we're excited to work with our new legislative majorities. I think we're also able to continue to work with the minority members and ensure that we've got a budget that functions for the whole of the state.
Yeah.
And I think that's the sort of prioritization that you'll see from the governor.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, frankly, the budget most of it is not partisan, right? It's bipartisan, and there's usually just a few things that people are disagreeing on. But let's talk a little bit about timing. So, statutorily, we have this deadline, July 1st, to conclude with the state budget work and have it all wrapped up so schools and local governments can plan for their fiscal years, and there's other reasons for that, of course. The deadline, of course, recently has been, I think we'll use the word fluid. How do you see, and this is to our legislative friends, how do you see that timeline moving forward? Because I think a lot of times, like July 1 is quick, especially when you're starting to talk about new legislative majorities, and like the legislature's just hasn't even really gotten going yet this year, and we're already fast forward to summer and this has got to get done. So how do you think that timeline will be moving forward? And are you expecting to be able to meet that deadline? I guess probably the answer is yes, but maybe Senator Anthony, we start with you this time.
I just got to disagree with you. We have already started this legislative term. We have been busy.
Yeah, I'm not saying you haven't been busy.
Yeah. And, I think Rep. Whitwer and I both come from local government, whether it's on an education board, me as a county commissioner. We know how important it is for our locals to have some predictability and understand the urgency to get this done. And just a little secret, women work harder. So I think that we will do our best to meet that for both pragmatic reasons and also because I think we're just got a lot of members who are ready to get to work. Our subcommittee chairs, as Rep. Whitwer mentioned, feel empowered, and we've already hit the ground running.
That's great. Yeah. Rep. Whitwer, do you have anything to add there?
I was just going to add in that I don't believe in the recent history we've ever had committees assigned this early.
No.
We've ever started this early. So we're starting off much quicker than past legislatures have. And one of the things that Rep. Anthony and I, oh my God, I called you representative too. Senator Anthony and I met about when we met in December, and it continues to be very important to us, and it will be met. We will have the budget done. We would like to have it done early. We have very aggressive timeline between the two of us and that we're committed to. So I think that you'll be pleased.
Yeah, that's great. And Director Harkins, do you want to talk about the importance of that July 1 deadline from the executive office? Is that like, this is the year we're going to hit it, and we're really going to push for that? It doesn't sound like you're going to need to push too hard, but.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. I know we've had conversations with both of the chairs on this issue as well. I think the governor's excited to hit the ground running with this new majority. And I think we're, again, as Senator Anthony pointed out, we've got a lot of shared common values, common goals. And I think that will help to make this happen quick, not quickly, not necessarily easily, but we'll get it done, and we'll get it done on time, and we'll deliver. I think having that sort of answer for communities, for schools early in their year makes a big difference. And while we've got a constitutional requirement to balance the budget by the end of September, getting it done by July is really meaningful for a lot of individuals and a lot of institutions around the state.
Yeah. So in our final time here today, I want to talk about economic development. And Director Harkins, I'm going to start with you. So there's been a lot of progress made on the economic development front in Michigan over the last couple of years with the creation of this SOAR fund. Not to get too far in the weeds for our listeners, but trying to make large gains on these projects that will attract new jobs in our cities, but also in our rural areas, and not only the biggest of the big projects, but some of those smaller sized projects. And we've seen some efforts that have been bipartisan coming out of the legislature. In fact, Rep. Whitwer's district, I think, has had the benefit of being the first district to kind of benefit from the creation of this new legislation. Do you see this being something that continues to be a priority for the governor? And do we think there will be additional pushes for appropriation asks or more economic tools in our toolbox?
The governor's really committed to continuing to find new ways, innovative ways to attract business, attract talent. I think you see her out on the road, stumping in benefiting the state every day. And what we've seen as a result of these SOAR dollars is a big change in how both large and small businesses look at the climate in the state of Michigan. And it's brought us back into conversations where folks may have passed us up before. And so I think there's a lot of continued interest in seeing those conversations through. We've been, as you point out, we've been successful in some large projects in this Lansing region. There's some pending projects in Metro Detroit, and even kind of in the more rural areas around Big Rapids. Right. I think you see a lot of that potential, and we'd like to be able to see that continue. I think we'll be having conversations with the new legislature about what those sort of investments look like and how we can structure that going forward. But certainly we've got a process. We've got something that I think has been very successful thus far, and the governor's interested in really growing that success to help continue to grow the state, make us more competitive, bring people back to Michigan so we can all benefit together. That's
great. And to our legislators, I guess in terms of economic development, do you see this being a discussion that is front and center in the appropriations committees, or is there a desire to kind of push this more to a policy discussion with appropriations to follow, or is that still fluid and being decided? Senator Anthony, I see you shaking your head. I don't know what that means, but you want to start?
It's a part of the puzzle, right? Again, when I mentioned that economic development doesn't live in isolation.
Right.
And so I think there'll be both appropriations as well as policy discussions to figure out the future of economic development and what it looks like. We're not wed to anything that's been done in the past.
Sure.
We're open to new approaches and styles, but I can just tell you from the Senate Democratic perspective that we're ready to do this, but also doing so with the lens of equity and inclusion, and making sure that real people are going to be impacted. Michiganders are going to find their voices in that process.
Yeah, when transparency is a part of that too, right? That's something we've been big on, is just making sure we're transparent and being really honest about what this is going to do. Representative Whitwer, do you want to add anything to that, or do you feel like it's been pretty well covered?
I think it's been pretty well covered.
Okay, that's fair. So I think we actually are out of time as quickly as these things go, but we thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for our listeners for tuning in to the My Business Matters podcast, and we hope you will join us for a future episode. Have a great day.